Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Life Lessons Part 4, Aging Gracefully into Your 30s, Millennial Edition. So this series is about the lessons I've learned along the journey of life. And it covers different aspects of my life now that I'm older and wiser and looking back on what I could have done better. It is really about giving a path and guide to others that are going through the similar circumstances right now. The end goal is to learn from my lessons and skip over my mistakes. As an aging millennial that's in his mid-30s, I want to give back to those who are just entering their 30s. And I want to give people younger than me a preview of what their 30s could be like. It's not all bad, but there's certainly things that nobody talks about as they enter their 30s. And usually people have to find out on their own. Nobody really tells them and walks them through what will actually happen. So I'll help you highlight some of the things that you'll need when you're entering your 30s. Because for some, being in your 30s will be your first foray into being an adult with all the responsibilities that falls with it. The challenges are not always easy, but with this guide, you'll be more prepared for the future. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my lessons learned, and my general thoughts on this. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And let's go. So although I'm in my mid-30s, I didn't have a platform in my early 30s to tell you about my experiences then. And I really wanted an older, wiser version of myself to give context as you're heading into your 30s and early 30s. Because sometimes when you just hit your 30s, you might not know everything that's going on in your life, and you need some context and distance away from that. So now that I'm a few years past being 30, I have more perspective about my early 30s. Generally, people have two different outlooks for what their 30s will look like: a period of direction or a period of stability. It is a decade that most people feel like full adults and that they can start building their lives. Life milestones like getting married, buying a house, and having kids all usually happen in your 30s. And as such, the responsibilities going from your 20s to 30s can be night and day for some people. And then on top of that, health issues that never concerned you while you were in your 20s might start cropping up in your 30s. And once the health issues start cropping up, it never goes away. It will continue for the rest of your life. So practically speaking, the habits you form in your 30s can make a lifetime of difference. And in your 30s, it can be a transition period as well. You still have time to change careers without having a lot of responsibility to care for. All this means is that people in their late 20s can expect to learn a lot in their next decade. And the more prepared you are, the better you can create plans and take actions against them. So now let's talk about some of my lessons learned while I'm in my 30s. Number 1, less free time. When you enter your 30s, you're never going to have more free time than you have now. And this was a very hard thing for me to realize, even though I theoretically understood that 30s comes with more responsibilities. As people are entering their peak earning potential and starting families, there's just a lot of pressure on our free time. It's harder and harder to find unallocated free time in our lives in our 30s. Responsibilities such as work, family, and friends will all eat away at your free time during this decade. And the free time that you have to do whatever you want to do becomes less and less. Obviously, this isn't the case for everyone. There's some people that retire early so they have loads of free time, but for the bulk of the people, less free time is going to be the norm. What I do to claw back some of my free time is to try to schedule it as much as I can. From a month-to-month perspective, I put in several days where I'm just not doing or planning anything. And then each and every day, I plan an hour or two where I'm just relaxing and doing nothing. This means that I have free time regardless of how busy I am because I already allocated it in my schedule. This ensures that I have free time to do what I need to do, and I also don't burn out because of obligations. For me, these activities include video gaming, hiking, and traveling. And depending on your personality, there are other ways you can have more free time as well. For example, if you're the type of person that always likes to do their own thing regardless of other people, then you could have your free time. But that means you might have difficulty in other aspects of your life like relationships or friendships. Or the other path to have free time is to be as efficient as possible with everything that you do. In reality, being efficient is very, very hard to do and it requires a ton of planning and you have to stay consistent. It's like you're juggling all these things up in the air at the same time. If you drop one, everything collapses. And the other downside of this is that not everything can be done efficiently. For example, relationships and friendships can't. So at the end of the day, when you're entering your 30s, be aware of the time commitments that you currently have and plan for them to increase. Be firm about your time boundaries and also be sure to schedule in free time as much as possible. Number 2, friends are harder to come by. The older you get, the harder it is to keep and create new friends. It's just what happens when we start to age. This is in part due to all the time commitments we have as we age and also family obligations as well. And it's harder to create friends during unstructured free time like we did when we were a child. The easy friends that you made during school, parties, or random encounters are mostly over. There are exceptions to this, especially for socially extroverted people, but by and large, people don't create more friendships as they age. It's still possible to make friends, but you have to devote a lot of time and energy to that process. And this also means that you have to take time and find people that truly click with you. Because as we age, it's harder to form bonds with just average friends. We want to find people that are really aligned to who we are. Because finding and keeping good friends in our lives is really difficult, and it's not really time insensitive. It takes a lot of energy and time. And in general, it gets harder in your 30s, but it gets much harder the older you get. Because all the things that I've said so far gets worse with age. So my suggestion is that if you have a core set of friends, try to take time and care for those friendships. But if you're starting over in a new city and you have to make friends, this process will be difficult. Be ready to spend a lot of time and energy forming bonds in your new city, especially if those friends are not your direct coworkers, but someone from outside of your work. I absolutely experienced this when I was moving to Seattle in my late 20s. Setting aside the Seattle freeze, it was very difficult for me to make long-standing friends in my first few years in this city. I had to really branch out and do various different things and then spend the time and energy to form those bonds with other people. The lesson that I learned from this is that I had to prioritize finding new people in my new city, or else it just wasn't going to happen. And then building up those relationships steadily over a long period of time. And in the end, I was able to find some close friendships in Seattle. Number 3, healthcare matters. My 30s were the first time I actually felt mortal, and it was terrifying. This was not a good feeling, and I still struggle to accept that I will not have better health than I did earlier in my life. This is because certain elements of my health that I ignored in my 20s cropped up and started to affect me in my 30s. Even if you keep your body in the best of conditions, it will deteriorate over time, so some health ailments will crop up eventually. And it will never really be the same as if you were in your 20s. In my 20s, I brushed off health issues all the time and I didn't really go to doctors for checkups, and I was okay. I also didn't eat very well or exercise on a regular basis. Entering my 30s and now in my mid-30s, I realized that this was a bad idea. Being in my 30s, I started to keep tabs on my physical, mental, and emotional health. And the health issues really cropped up over a long period of time. It didn't just suddenly appear when I hit 30. Small issues for me that built up over time were weight issues, allergies, and constant burnout. I noticed that if I didn't mitigate it or alleviate it, it would get worse over time as I aged. So in my 30s, I started to go to the doctor's office a lot more, getting regular checkups and blood work done. And I'm starting to do a lot of preventative things like drinking a lot of water, exercising regularly, and going to therapy. And during one of these checkups, I even found that I had sleep apnea, that which undiagnosed would affect me over a long period of time, causing huge and potentially deadly health consequences for later in my life. So as you get older, you need to keep an eye on your health because it will deteriorate and you need to know the warning signs of that. Because a small and minor discomfort in your 20s can turn into something larger in your 30s or 40s. So my lesson learned is be aware of your health entering your 30s. Number 4, responsibilities have impact. My 20s were a series of try it and see what happens. There wasn't really any large consequences to those actions. The only thing that I really took seriously at the time was my engineering career, but everything else was try it and see. Because as you enter your 30s, it gets harder and harder for you to do those try and see actions. More and more often, your decisions will have consequences in your life. That's because in your 30s, a series of life milestones usually occur during that period. Responsibilities such as getting married, buying a house, having a family, all have real-world consequences. Choices that not only have noticeable impact on you, but others around you. It was very easy in my 20s to move from different cities and start over fresh. Now that I'm married and settled down, moving from city to city is a big change. Your 30s can be littered with responsibilities and decisions that can affect you later down in life. My lessons learned from this is that you have to embrace the responsibilities coming your way and also build up that responsibility muscle any way you can. For a simple example, say you've never taken care of a pet before. Try with the goldfish first before you get that dog or cat. Or before getting married, moving in with your potential spouse to see how you live together. These are things that can give you a preview of the responsibilities that you need to handle later down in life. There are a lot of growing up that's needed for this, and not everyone can navigate that with ease. So expect that you'll be taking on more responsibility and try to build up that muscle as much as you can. And number 5, deliberate life goals are a must. When you're in your 30s and you don't have a life goal or purpose, you have to spend some time to find that as soon as possible. And if you do have a life goal or purpose, now's the time to reevaluate it again. This urgency is because of one of 2 reasons. First, you might not have future time available to you to work on your life goal or purpose. And the second is that the older you get, you might not have energy or passion left in the tank to pursue those things. When you get older and cross a specific barrier, let's say 35 years old, you start getting into what I like to call, I don't have energy for it. This means that it's harder for your body and mind to focus on something and put a lot of time and energy into it. Stamina and focus in your 20s can't easily be conjured up in your 30s or 40s as easily. And this is especially true if you didn't challenge yourself in your 20s and you're now trying to focus for the first time in your 30s. And what also happens is people tend to get stuck in whatever they're doing, coasting and being comfortable. And when you're in your 30s, it's a good time to reevaluate whether you want to have that coast and be stable lifestyle. This lifestyle is not all bad, but you have to make sure that it's an active decision and not a passive one. So if you want help in finding your own life's vision or purpose, check out my previous video on goals versus aspirations. In this video, I'll give you the tools to help you narrow down your goals and aspirations in life. Or you can check out my video on how to create a vision, how to create a mission statement for your life, in which I also help you to go through an exercise to find your life's goals. So whatever age you're at, get clear on what your life's goals or purpose are in life. It can not only help you better define your life, but it also can give you the energy and passion for that life. So here are my general thoughts on entering your 30s. Of course, all these tips are practical for any age, but something special happens when you're entering your 20s to your 30s, especially for millennials. Because for millennials, more than other generations previous to us, the 20s were an incubation period. For us, the 20s were like an extended adolescent period. We're not fully adults during that time. Most boomers got houses, married, and had families in their 20s, which isn't the same as millennials. What this means is that we're experiencing a lot of life's milestones in our 30s now. And more than ever, we need help transitioning those people from their 20s to their 30s so that they can become productive individuals in the future. And the situation now is completely different because the financial landscape just isn't conducive to millennials starting their lives earlier. And of course, each person's transition into their 30s is different from everyone else's. I made this video with someone very general in mind. I didn't have a specific person. So what that means is some person's 30 can be some other person's 25, or some person's 35 may be other person's 30. But regardless of your age, the key to a successful transition is to be aware that change is occurring and also accept that change will happen. So those are my lessons learned on transitioning into your 30s. I know for me, 30s was a huge mental change for me, even though it's just a number. It was significant because it marked the next stage of my life, and I didn't know if I was prepared for it. I noticed that I had a new level of maturity, health issues, and increased responsibility during this time. And my outlook on life completely changed from 5 years prior when I had a more carefree life. Adapting to this new Cade was and is still difficult for me, because there's still some 20-year-old part of me that's roaming around in my head and wanting to do things the way it was. It's just that my 20-year-old self comes out less and less these days. So take the lessons I've learned, heed my warnings, and have a good 30s. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on what you think your 30s will be and what advice would you give if you're in your 30s. And I'll see you next time.